So this is TK from Singapore, and I'm delighted to have you with us, TK. And you have been doing a ton of virtual stuff. So tell me what's been going on for you around virtual. What are you finding? What's working to help people connect and develop more of a human element to the virtual meeting or workshop?
Right. Thanks, Bob. Good to hear from you and see you again. So, yeah, just a couple of thoughts. What have I been up to lately? I think very much all the workshops have they are no longer face to face. They are all virtual. So whatever is virtual is still ongoing, still running. Whatever is face to face, there's so much uncertainty. So very much for my practice, I've been facilitating a lot of workshops online, and I'm seeing really a very high demand for it at the moment. Interestingly, because for Singapore, our COVID-19 situation is kind of very stable now. We haven't seen any local transmission for the past week,
Oh,
like zero
wow.
transmission.
Amazing.
So one of the things which I'm actually also hearing from my clients is that, next year maybe they want to do hybrid. So no longer are is it going to be just face to face, just virtual? It might be an element of both. So that's what I'm seeing. But definitely for sure this year I feel that I experimented so much with different kind of virtual platforms, different ways of running workshops. And I would still say the majority of the time, I would say I run training workshops, not so much of facilitation workshops. But of course, in training workshops, I always facilitate.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I've been busy with.
Yeah. And I think a lot of our listeners will be both. So it's great. Anything you can do in training, you can probably do in facilitation and vice versa.
Mm, 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 yeah,
So
yeah.
do you want to share a little bit about what what is the limitation of virtual that you still feel, and what is the add-on of virtual that
Mm,
where you can go
okay. Yeah.
beyond face to face?
Right. So I remember we had this conversation around like, is virtual more effective? Is it less effective? The intuitive response for people would be to say, no, virtual is not as good as a face-to-face.
Hmm.
But what I experienced this year, interestingly, I had some uh, workshops which wasn't like what I expected it to be. I actually ran a couple of workshops where I designed everything from the face-to-face to virtual. And interestingly, when I conducted the workshops, I felt that the workshops were a lot more effective than the face-to-face workshops. And I actually had the feedback score to prove that. So
Whoa.
for on one end, I really felt I think it is better. The second thing is learners also, of course, it's a different batch, experience it and they felt that equally effective. And the common responses that they have is, wow, I didn't know virtual sessions can be so effective. It doesn't feel like it's virtual. It just feels like it's face to face. So I noticed that, if we understand how the virtualness of things are, we can tap into its strengths, amplify it, and then it can still be as good as face to face. So when I reflect on this, right, a couple of things which I think would be the strength of virtual is uh, in virtual setting, right, one thing is if you want to work, you cannot put in like an 8 hour session.
Hmm.
Likelihood 3 hours, 4 hours, and then you space it over a period of time.
Hmm.
And the power is actually in the spacing of workshops over a period of time. So in the past, let's say it's 8 hour intensive, people are just really very, very drained anyway. With facilitation skills, of course, we engage them, but we are really making them work very, very hard. But if you kind of split it into, let's say, 3.5 hours, get them ready for certain things, then we have a break of a couple of days or maybe 1 week. What happens is in between, they can spend time doing preparation, doing thinking, doing their own research, talking to their own teams. When they come back again, they're a lot more prepared. So when they go for conversations, normally the conversations are a lot deeper. In a
Mm.
training setting, what that means is I can teach basic skills, let them do some homework or preparation. When they come for the session two, their practice I notice normally a lot higher in
Mm-hmm.
quality in terms of delivery. The preparation that they do, or sometimes I give them small little practice, over the week. When they really work on it, when they come back, it becomes a lot more effective. So because of that, when we space a 3-day program, let's say over 3 weeks, the learning can be a lot more deeper.
Yeah.
I noticed the outcomes a lot stronger than when it was
Mm-hmm.
face to face for 3 days. Yeah, I haven't
Interesting.
had a lot of this kind of conversations, facilitated conversations online, but I noticed when we space it apart, and people really put in the effort to do preparation, to do their thinking, the meetings can be a lot more effective.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I can achieve, let's say, within 2 hours, what I think people probably would have achieved in like 3.5 or 4 hours of meetings, because everybody comes prepared. They do their research, they do their thinking. When we come together, we share perspective, and people are ready to make decisions on the spot.
Mm.
So that's what I notice.
And what about the thing that people are complaining about is that I feel like I'm just staring at this box of people. If you're using Zoom,
Yeah.
I don't really feel like I'm connecting with anyone. This is not the usual social dynamics that goes on in the breaks. People, leave the screen during their breaks. They come in and they're all got their mics muted, etc. How do we get that social
Mhm.
connection?
Okay. I think this is a very valid concern. Uh, okay, so early in the COVID, right, around June, July, I actually did quite a few workshops and actually do a research piece, a little bit like action research. So I was
Mm-hmm.
asking people, what challenges are you facing in part one of the conversation, and then part two, of course, I asked them for solutions. I gathered about 100 responses from different practitioners, facilitators, people who run meetings, and when I spent 2 days analyzing it. So let me share
Whoa.
with you something.
Yeah, please
I
do.
actually have a list of actually what people think are the how should I say, the biggest issues and problems. So at the top of the list, people are actually saying low engagement and uneven participation. That is number one problem.
Wow.
Yeah, so I think this is very valid. It is not actually caused by virtualness of things. Actually, it is amplified by the virtualness of things. This happens all the time in face-to-face meetings as well.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, so I noticed, of course, then in a virtual space, everything gets like blown up 10 times in proportion.
Yeah, people like to complain about it.
Yeah. So number two, technological challenges faced by sometimes it's participants, sometimes it's hosts. This, of course, gets reduced if people get more and more familiar with the virtualness of things.
So let me just check. Were
Yeah.
you gonna screen share or not? You just
No, I was just
not
reading
here.
through.
Okay, great. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
please. Mhm.
Right. So, number three, actually, it's about it's challenging for people to kind of sense the room, read the room, like, what are people saying? Are they agreeing? And then because when they stare at the screen, sometimes they will be thinking, you can't sense their body language. So if you really want to check for whether people are okay, there might be a need to be very deliberate, like, is everything okay? If it's okay, can I see a thumbs up? Then you get some responses.
Mhm.
Or you might want to use those kind of like annotation function. And then I like to do the smiley face. From the frowning to the smiley face, then I just draw a line, right?
Yeah, like a
With
gradient.
different level of
Yeah.
intensity.
Mhm.
Then I can ask people, what do you think of this particular idea, perspective? What's your level of agreement on this? And then when people, of course, put in their annotation, now we are getting responses from the room. Then it allows people with differing perspective to kind of share a little bit. So I find that this particular thing about challenging to sense or read the room, I think when we talk about virtualness, this is going to be a big problem.
Mhm. Mhm.
And we will need some tools or techniques to help us. So if
Mhm.
we just rely on Zoom, and then with just the windows of Zoom, it will be very tough. But if we have an add-on, whether it's PowerPoint annotation, whether you use some polling tools, whether you use Google Jamboard or any visualization tool, I think it will help to a certain extent.
Mm. Mm.
Number four, uneasiness to go into deep discussions and conversation. I think as I notice as we go down the list, a big part of it actually deals with people's how should I say, the people factor lah. So it is fairly common for us, in meetings face to face. I think people sometimes talk about things that's tougher, that's more sensitive, that requires a lot more deliberation. But in an online setting, I think people are just not so used to it.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, and one thing I notice finding out when I have conversation with clients, switching on the camera is not a norm.
Hmm.
Like for us, I think as facilitators, we often have a way of convincing people or enticing people to switch on their cam. So our sessions are fairly effective, I would say. But I notice in a lot of corporate settings, the default is always camera off.
Yeah, camera off, mic off, you have no idea who's there.
Yeah, you have no idea who's there, and sometimes they have two computers. They are actually on two meetings.
Yeah. Wow. I don't know if that's typical in North America, but you've heard about that in the APAC region.
Yes,
Wow.
yes. Yeah, people tell me that they get double booked for meetings and they have to attend both, so that's what they do. Yeah, and
Wow.
they say, "Oh, I'm so effective." So I wonder about how effective that is.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. That's
right.
tricky. Okay.
Yeah, that's the fourth. The last one, interestingly, is people feel socially distant with one another.
Hmm.
And I noticed that that is actually a contributory factor to all the rest. Yeah, if I cannot connect with you well, I do not understand you well, I don't establish a relationship with you, that's why I feel uncomfortable going to deep discussion. That's why I don't feel comfortable showing you my real emotions and what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling. That's why maybe I stay quiet as well. So I
Yeah.
noticed this part about feeling socially distant, about not establishing relationship with people. I think it is very, very critical. For us as our work as facilitators, perhaps while this is rated number 5 of the top 5, right? I think it is probably the most important one that we need to address.
Yeah, yeah, and that's what I wanted to do with this blog topic. So what have you found to help people not socially distance? And it's interesting we use that term because it's used in COVID
Mm, mm, mm,
as well. But
mm. Yes, I think before COVID, I mean, we use physical distance, social distance. Hardly people know this terminology, but now everybody knows it at the back of their mind. Yeah, so this is a very tough question. I would say there are different things that we can do, but I also think that different organization, different people might find certain things useful for them, certain things not useful for them, because of, I would say, cultural difference. And organizations also have their own culture. The other thing is, no, we facilitators have our own preference as well. Certain things that might work for certain facilitators, it may not work for other facilitators.
hmm
So I'm just going to, share some of the things which I think might work. Might work. Yeah. So, uh, okay. So I think we probably would be very comfortable as facilitators doing check-ins and check-outs. So for me, that is always the first thing. When we do check-in, do we need to always have everybody hear everybody? I always put a question mark.
hmm hmm
It really, for me, depends on the purpose. If I want to hear everybody's voice, yes, then I go around the room. But going around the room can take a long time, especially if you have like 15, 20 people in a session. Everybody checking in 30 seconds for 20 people, that's already 10 minutes.
hmm
You may not afford that amount of time. So I always think about, is it better sometimes to break it into small groups, pairs, or in threes? I can give them 5 minutes, 6 minutes to just have that conversation. When they do that, guess what? Now they are already warm up for conversations. So is it important for me as a facilitator to hear where people are? Sometimes I put a question mark. Is it
Yeah,
my comfort because I'm comfortable hearing their voices, or does it actually serve a purpose for them? So
yeah.
this is always a question I have in my mind when I design the check-in process. Yeah, so when we do the check-in, in small group, then for me, I always try to engineer it. I'm an engineer by training, so I engineer a lot of things. I try to make sure people interact with, no, they always interact with different people. The main reason is I try not to let them stay together with their best friends, same department, same functions. So if we get them to kind of interact with one another early,
Hmm.
and then maybe throughout the meetings we have different opportunities for people to interact with one another, I think over a period of time, now the whole team is familiar with one another. They can go into deeper conversations, deeper discussion without feeling awkward. Yeah,
Yeah.
so I find that borrowing from another friend, Gerald, he always says connection before content. We want to make sure people connect with one another, build relationship. Once they can have that stable relationship, I think they are now more open to being vulnerable. Vulnerable in terms of sharing their own thoughts, their ideas, and not being afraid to appear, uncertain in front of others. If we talk
Hmm.
about things that's, I think, deeper, well, the reality is nobody have clarity of 100% clarity of everything. So I think that relationship building is becoming more critical in this case.
Yeah, yeah. And what I found in, we've done this in North America, but I would start with a several round robins where they pop us randomly into breakout rooms with just one other or two other people, spend 3 to 5 minutes together, come out briefly, pop us into another room, get to know another
Mm,
2 or 3 people. And maybe the question is very related to the content, or like,
yeah.
what have you already thought about related to this problem? What do you know about it? And the second
Mm,
round will be a slightly different question. What have you heard from others about solutions, etc. And so you come back, 6 or 7 people, you've had a really good conversation with them, and then you can, as you
mm,
said, you're warmed up,
yeah.
and you also feel like you've been able to share your thinking out loud in
Yeah.
quite a lot of depths.
I
Does that?
really like what you say about the multiple rounds of check-in, but you don't spend too much time in each one. And each check-in has a slightly different theme. I think that's useful.
Do you think it would work in the APAC region in terms of like
I think so.
acceptability?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
one of
Yes,
our
it will
questions
work.
earlier was like, is a lot of things what we're doing around social connection really universally applicable across the planet? And I think, so far I've found yes. I mean, we're working in the Middle East, and we've all our colleagues are all over the APAC region, and we've got several in Europe, North America. We're all saying really the same thing, that
Mm.
people
I think
need,
that's good to know.
humans love to be
Yeah.
connected.
Yeah. Yeah. So I have one
Yes,
additional thought
please.
around that.
Yes, then we should wrap
Most
up.
of the time when people go into meetings, right, they always talk about serious stuff. They always talk about work.
Mm-hmm.
I think if let's say you have the multiple rounds, maybe round one do social connection.
Mm-hmm.
People, I think, need to connect more than just relating to work.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, yeah, if you have some social connection before professional connection, I think that's very powerful.
Yeah, that's really great. Now,
And
where are
and
you
that's
going?
how I experience our connection all the time with you.
Ah, yes, we do always start socially, don't we?
Yeah,
And we always have a check-in, like, what's going on with COVID around the world? It's a great topic.
yeah.
Um, were you going to screen share one thing?
Yes, I want to screen share one thing.
Okay, so we'll leave
Okay,
the
give.
audience with this one tip here, one more tip.
All right. Okay, I'm sharing a PowerPoint. Are you able to see it?
Yes, really nicely, thank you.
Okay. So this is actually not done by me. I was teaching a program, and this was done by participants. They had some ideas,
Awesome.
and yeah. So I just want to share this portion. They were actually doing some form of debriefing. So the first activity they did was this is a map of Singapore. So
Mm-hmm.
they were literally asking people. They put this image on the Google Jamboard, and they literally ask people, oh, which part of Singapore, are you at? Like where do you stay? So
Mm-hmm.
literally people put their names here, and then it's like, wow, okay, now we know where people are, right?
Mm-hmm.
Guess what? You can launch into conversations there. What is your favorite food? Or what would you recommend for people if they go to your area? So immediately people start to connect socially. And
Mm-hmm.
then you can see, oh, the people who kind of stay near to one another, you can be a teammate. Yeah, so then that's how we can do grouping. Very interesting. And this actually lightens the mood before we go into serious conversations.
Mm-hmm.
So I noticed like if we do something like this, it appears pretty random, but it is also quite fun and light-hearted. So another thing like what we talk about social connection, right, in virtual meetings, sometimes making it a little bit light-hearted, a little bit jovial, a little bit more intriguing, I think it will work quite well for us. As we facilitate conversations and we go deep, it tends to be very, very serious. It needs to be balanced with something more light-hearted. I think it will work very well.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. It reminded me of using Padlet as well, where before the course we went in and pinned ourselves all over the United States.
Yeah.
People were coming in from the US. So in summary, I think a couple of things I remember is maybe, and you can add just because the other videos we summarized as well, that it's important that people get to socially connect early. It's important that people get to know that social minimize the social distancing by connecting people as early as possible in a variety of ways and through lightheartedness. And what else did you say? Try and remind yourself, try and ask yourself as a facilitator, am I doing this for me or am I doing this for the participants? And then checking in, kind of reading the room on a gradients of agreement, getting people to use emoticons on a annotate board or whiteboard or whatever. What else would you sum up just quickly for our audience?
I think the last one, I would say the checkout. When normally we finish the meeting, we'll probably do one round reflection, things like that. But either summarize for actions, reflections, then we go off, right? I would like to add one more suggestions. After you end off the official meeting, do casual. We will hang around for conversations. If you want to stay back, you can just just chit chat.
Yeah.
Sometimes that
like you would
wonders.
in a real room. Yeah.
Yes, like you would in a real room, so there's no agenda. Some people who really want to hang around, they'll stay another 5-10 minutes, and then that's where sometimes real conversations happen. I noticed that quite a few times.
It's true, isn't it? And you get people's real questions that they're afraid to ask in front of the group, or the whole group rather.
Yeah. Right.
All right, well, let's leave it there. I'm gonna stop the recording, and thank you so much, TK. This is delightful to hear your thinking, because I know you've been thinking about this for a lot over the last few months and sharing just these little tasters, and I was curious what you had come up with. Your research was fantastic.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for inviting me to this conversation.
All right. Goodbye.